Hey Brad Squad, it's me, Brad Bernstein. I'm out in the field at St. Thomas Church on 5th Avenue and 53rd Street in Midtown Manhattan. And I'm gonna meet Betsy Ashton. She's a portrait artist who makes these beautiful paintings of immigrants and their stories.
It took me 2 years to do all of them, which means I was doing one about every month. And that's really pushing it for doing portraits like this size.
What inspired you to do all of this?
I'm sitting in church downstairs in the sanctuary. The message is about love thy neighbor as thyself, the Good Samaritan. And I'm sitting there and there's this disconnect between that and between what I'm hearing outside in the media. The people coming in on the border are not criminals. These are people running away from problems. You don't leave your home if everything's going well. You only leave when you are threatened or you're starving. I was getting a nudge that said, you know, Betsy, you were a reporter before. You've got the ability to write and the ability to tell stories, and you've got this ability to paint. You ought to be doing something with it. And I felt this story wasn't balanced. In the course of going around and talking to different immigrants from different countries and cultures and refugees and writing their stories and painting their portraits, and what I found is that the grit and the guts and the stamina and the risk-taking that I see in the immigrants today is just like what we've celebrated in past generations. That's the stuff that made America great.
What I have found just in my everyday life is that most people who are anti-immigrant, who are Trump supporters, they will always say, kick all the immigrants out except this one. I know this one, he's my friend, he works for me. That's a good person, but everybody else should be kicked out.
Absolutely. My feeling is if you understand, if you know the person, you can empathize. They can become your friends. They're not threatening. When you understand why they came here, what it was like getting here, the challenges of settling in, and then what they've done since. I did Ordinary People. I wanted the American people to see that the everyday immigrants coming here are really good people too. They may not be celebrated, you don't know them, but get to know them.
Edelson Rigo, you know him as Eddie. What interested you in painting his portrait and telling his story?
He's a wonderful chef. He came to this country from Sao Paulo, Brazil. His parents were Italian immigrants to Brazil, and they had a couple little pizza parlors there. And he said the crime was so bad. After the 8th bloody robbery, they retired and went off into the safer countryside. But he was a young man. He needed to work, and he liked to cook, and he liked the big city. So he goes online and he says, does anybody need a pizza man? The pizza parlor in Long Island said yes. And they brought him in and, of course, got the visa. But then he got a job with a coffee importer in the city, which he loved because it brought him right into Manhattan. He started setting up espresso bars for this company, and they were very popular. Unfortunately, the company didn't survive the Great Recession. But one of the customers who had been there with Eddie said, come to my building and please, start up an espresso bar for me. He is charming. He's a great chef. He's a delightful human being. He's now a very proud citizen. Here he's talking about New York being safe. You can live here. You don't have people coming with guns at you all the time, as he did in Brazil.
Now standing here in front of Maria Salome, she looks to be very, very proud of the position she's in today, in a very happy place in her life.
Her story is the one that brings tears to most people's eyes, but she has a reason to be proud and a reason to be happy. The time that I met her, she was undocumented. Maria Salome is from Guatemala. Her husband abandoned her with their 5 children, ages 3 to 16. She went out to get a job. As a laundress, she didn't make enough money to feed them. She said, my children were malnourished. She was told that she could either become a prostitute or she could leave the country. Those were the only 2 ways that she could possibly support her children. She did hire a coyote, one of these people, to transport her up through Mexico, cross the Rio Grande at night, and then they walked 2 days and 2 nights. 2 o'clock in the morning, they got to a road. They were picked up by a bus, and she eventually made it to New York City. She will not talk about the journey. I know from talking to other women, Mexican women, they expect to get raped. They pack their contraceptivos. But she did get here, and she got into a community of Guatemalans where the men were working in construction. And the owner said, I need somebody to clean the grid out. And he said, we know somebody. And she did a magnificent job and was immediately hired to be the housekeeper. She was there 4 years. They loved her. She was wonderful. And she said, I have to go home. She goes back the same way she came. They've run out of money. There's no way that she in Guatemala can earn anything like what she was sending down to support them. And she says, I have to go back. She brings a 6-year-old back with her. She gets a little apartment. She gets the little boy in public school. She gets another job. And as years go by, she also becomes a lay preacher in an evangelical church. And she gets to know other immigrants in the community. She gets to know an immigration lawyer. And the week after I finished this portrait, she got her green card. She bought a plane ticket to Guatemala. She flew back to hug the children and to meet the spouses. She missed all the weddings and to touch and hold grandchildren that she didn't know. They want her to come back. And she says, no, this is my home. This is where I belong. This is a good country. This country has been good to me. And of course, as a woman, she has a life here that she couldn't possibly have in Guatemala. This is a good woman. And of course, she's proud. She says, I was able to take care of my family.
What possessed you to decide that this person is going to have their hands open versus their hands closed?
I spend time with people. I don't make a decision until I observe and listen. As a reporter, I ask a lot of questions, and I'm also, as an artist, observing the person at the same time. Body language, expression, hands, and hands are very expressive. And then I wanted them all to be communicating out, to have some relationship with the viewer. What's special to you? Is it your work? For example, with John Lamb, who is a developer, he's got an office and he's got pictures of his buildings behind him. Or in the case of Rika, it's her beautiful home. She teaches in a school. She had these gorgeous saris, even though what she's wearing underneath it is something that she would wear to school, because she's a woman of two cultures. That spoke to me. Richard Mazda, who is a director in a theater, he's in the theater. In the case of my Burmese person over there, Mio Thwei, he has a cart where he sells Burmese bites. That's his business.
We're now standing in front of Abdul, and he looks like he's very relaxed. Perhaps he's even a student.
Well, the reason he's relaxed is because he's not in a war zone. If you had been through what he was through as a child, you'd be relaxed too to be studying and getting a master's degree in public administration at the Maxwell School in Syracuse University. He was born in 1980. Right at the time the Russians were being pushed out of Afghanistan. This is when ISIS started to come in, the Taliban, and they started taking over. There were all kinds of factions fighting for control of the country, and he lived right in Kabul, which is the capital. And he said, you didn't know which group was going to be fighting next. He said, I didn't grow up with the sound of music. It was the sound of rockets and bombs. The boys had been educated in schools where they had learned English. The girls, of course, were not sent to school in those days. When the Americans came in to fight the Taliban, his older brothers went in to help the special forces groups, and then he became an interpreter. And then he also helped to try to train some of the other people, the locals, to have better government. The tables started to turn. People who, like him, had worked for the Americans started to disappear. And what he said was the Taliban wasn't really gone. You didn't know who among your neighbors or friends was actually secretly harboring or threatened by the Taliban. Some of them even got into the government. His life was threatened. His family's life was threatened. And so his older brothers immediately applied for refugee status, and they were granted it. And he is working for an interfaith group that helps settle other refugees and helping them learn what it's like to live in America and the culture.
Why wouldn't anybody want this man to be in America? It's amazing.
I cannot imagine. He is such a good person, and he is studying public administration because he says, I know what bad government is. I saw a government in ruins. I saw corruption, so I can help build the right kind of government and do the right thing.
Take us through the process of being an artist.
I just started out with people that I knew. I would ask them where they came from, what it was like getting here, and what they've done since. We sit down and we talk, and I sketch. I do live sketches first. Now I'm going to do a photo shoot. I never pose people. I just get them to be in a comfortable place. Nobody has to sit hard for me. I'll talk to them, and then I go back and I look at the photographs and I listen to the tape. I look at what I've observed about this person and what I've heard in their story. What brings out to me that character. And then I decide this is it. Then I get out the canvas, I blow up the picture, I go into my studio. I'm always focused on the eyes, the communication, the face is always going to be in sharper focus. I'll work for 3 to 5 hours at a stretch. I really get into it and I just keep going.
What were their reactions after you showed them their portraits and their story?
Well, they see it from the very beginning. I show them the pictures that are going to be my primary reference, and they all like them. Every day that I'm working, at the end of that day, I take a picture and I send it to them.
We're in front of Perez Luxama. He's a very well-dressed man.
Perez Luxama, his grandparents on his father's side were murdered by Papa Doc Duvalier, the dictator in Haiti. His father fled the country. When there was a government change, his father came back. His mother worked for the Roman Catholic Church. But there was a Roman Catholic priest named Aristide who became the president. When Aristide was deposed, thrown out by a military coup, his mother disappeared. Finally, they discovered that their mother had been exiled by the military. She luckily managed to get to Brooklyn. She had some family here, and she was granted refugee status. Finally, she got back in touch with the father, the children, convinced the father to bring the children up, all granted refugee status. He got into a Brooklyn school that was kind of tough. He only spoke French and Creole, so he got beaten up. They said, oh, they called me stupid and everything. We weren't stupid, we just didn't know English. But he also, as he got bigger, was a strapping, good soccer player. That helped him to assimilate better. It always is with boys, with sports. And he won a scholarship to St. John's College, and he was very good always at math and science, which didn't require the same language skills. He went to college, he became a teacher. To this day, teaches dressed like this. He wants these kids, particularly the boys, to have respect for a man, for education. He's kind of a surrogate father to a lot of boys who really don't have a relationship with their fathers. He also founded an organization called Life of Hope, which is a center for helping immigrants, particularly Haitians, so that you can be a productive citizen. He has a brother who is a priest, and he has another brother who joined the military right after 9/11 because he said, this is my country, I want to help it. And he's a military officer to this day. Talk about a family that had something to give. This is the only painting that's perhaps a little out of sync with the rest. This is a painting that represents the people who declined to sit for me. I wasn't surprised when I put the word out to 2 undocumented women that they were unwilling to sit. That's understandable. But what really stunned me was one young man. I'm ready to have the interview, and he said, oh, Betsy, I'm not sure. And I said, why? You were so proud. You're a citizen. He's from Ghana. He even came here totally legally. He won the visa lottery. I said, you do everything right. You have nothing to fear. You're a wonderful example of an immigrant who is a good citizen. He said, my friends are scared because this particular government seems to want to find any excuse to say that you're a criminal and keep people out. He said, it's scary. It's a scary moment. We feel that we're not wanted here. He said, people with black and brown skin. This is a man who's a good citizen, a good person, who's contributing to this country. And that fear is a terrible thing. And I said, let me take one picture. Just show me how you feel. He just immediately expressed this sad pose. He has a sunny disposition, but it's being grayed out by this fear. And then I went back, and in order to take out the features of the face, I just made the marks, and I stepped back and I looked at it, and it looks initially like a fence, which is appropriate because there are people being fenced out. And then I stepped back and looked at it again. I said, good heavens, it's a swastika. Do I want to fill that in? No, because that is a universal symbol of fear. And what's more, it's that kind of divisive fear against groups of people. So it's appropriate because you can't deny that's what's going on now. I call this finally, it's the last picture in the exhibition.
This is the first exhibit that you've shown. It's been up for how long now?
It's been up for 2 weeks. It'll be up for 2 more weeks, and then it will be going uptown to the Riverside Church, where it'll be up for 6 more weeks.
What has the reaction been so far?
Oh, it's been wonderful. People have actually shed some tears. They said, you've really touched my heart. These stories are so wonderful. Thank you for doing this. Some have said, I'm an immigrant, or my parents were immigrants, and I remember their stories, and this just brings it all back to me. It's time to get this story out. And I just think America has to remember this is who we are. And this is what built our country. This is what made America great, is the human capital, the ingenuity, the risk-taking the hard work of immigrants, the willingness to take any job initially, and the next thing you know, they are building companies.
Has there been any negative comments made about your subjects?
There was one person who came in who believes everything Donald Trump says, was just giving me a big argument about politics in general. And it started with that I'm all wrong on immigration and, that these people ought to be all kept out.
All of these people, that they should all be kicked out.
He wasn't interested in the details. He's bought what Trump is saying.
Unfortunately, words matter, and words touch and words touch emotions, and emotions cause behavior. And hopefully some of this will, maybe some people who are on the fence, and I hate to use that pun, maybe they will have their minds changed a little.
I have a book over here of people's comments, and they're just lovely. There are many more people who came in here who had their hearts touched and who had their minds opened by, for example, the surprising facts about immigrants.
You've put these banners up, and you have one banner about thoughts to ponder, sayings that come from the Bible and other religious texts, and maybe some poetry as well. You also have some surprising facts about immigrants here. What made you want to put these banners up?
I used to be a reporter. I deal in facts. The information on this banner comes from New American Economy, which is a nonpartisan research group studying the economic impact of immigrants on cities and towns. There are 3.1 million immigrant entrepreneurs in the U.S. They start businesses at a much greater rate than the average people who were born here.
9 out of 10 cities in the United States that accepted the most refugees per capita saw their crime rates decrease dramatically. What does that say about immigrants who are coming here?
They are not causing crime. They are stabilizing those areas. That's the facts.
If you think about it, and you're an immigrant and you're going to make a perilous journey across multiple countries, try to cross the border from Mexico, and leave your family behind to come to America, you're coming to make a better life. Why would you come here to go kill and maim and rape? You don't need to make the trip over here to do it.
Look, they're running away from crime.
Correct.
They're
Correct.
not coming here to create
Correct.
it. They're coming here to give their children a better life.
43% of the 500 largest companies in America were started by immigrants or the children of immigrants.
1 in 4 of our doctors in the U.S., as well as 1 in 4 home health aides are immigrants. The woman who's taking care of your elderly parents is probably an immigrant.
You have a lot of thoughts to ponder, from Pope Francis to the Archbishop of New York. You have Martin Luther King, quotes about what Jesus said. What really speaks to you and says it all succinctly?
Pope Francis, when we turn our gaze to immigrants and refugees, we discover that they do not arrive empty-handed. They bring their courage, their skills, their energy and aspirations, as well as the treasures of their own cultures, and in this way, they enrich the lives of the nations that receive them. What is this country but a country of immigrants who have enriched America?
What it means to you, the term the American dream.
I've achieved the American dream, which is to do something meaningful and to put it out there and to have good people come and be moved by what I'm doing.
Betsy, wonderful. This is wonderful. You're wonderful, and thank you for coming on our show.
Thank you. I'm delighted.